Okay, hey, it's Mark from Ripple Training. So today on MacBreak Studio, I'm going to show you how to levitate an object using motion. Let's get started. Okay, first of all, I have to give credit to Zach King, who did this pretty much exact same type of tutorial, but using After Effects. And we're going to do it in Motion. We'll do things a little bit differently. So I've imported two clips into Motion. Here I've got my foreground clip of the mug. And what I did is I attached a white coat hanger to it with some tape on the back. And I held it in front of a pop-up diffuser as a white background. You could do this against a green background and do a green screen key or a blue background. I had this, so I used this. Luma key is what I'm going to use. It's a little more difficult with a Luma key actually to do this, but that way we'll learn a little about Luma key. Also, almost everything we're doing here in Motion, you could do in Final Cut. I'm doing in Motion because there's a few additional tools that make this job easier. Besides the foreground, I'll turn that off, I've got the background clip that you saw at the beginning that I exported from Final Cut as a reference so that my timing will match. So I've got that there. I'll turn off that background clip and turn the foreground on. I've also placed markers on where this foreground needs to be. In other words, let me turn that off again momentarily. It needs to be available while I've got my hand up there. So this is where we need it. Now you'll notice that the clip isn't long enough. So we're going to use a feature of Motion to take care of that. Okay, let's get started. So with this foreground clip selected, I'll go to my shortcut for filters and choose keying Luma keyer. In the inspector, I'm going to invert the Luma key. I'll turn that background off and I'll set my view to the matte view where I want perfectly white for the cup and perfectly black for the background. So first I'll adjust the curves here to make that cup nice and white and knock that background back as much as possible. And I only need to knock it enough so that I have black around the cup. And I'm trying to get all the little black areas out of the cup. There's a few bright specular highlights that are being keyed out that I want to see if I can get rid of. And it's important when you're doing this to scrub through the clip to see what it looks like at different points in time. And that looks great except for this one little part right there. To help with that, a couple tools. One is the Luma roll-off, which in this case doesn't help very much. And then in the matte tools, I can adjust the levels. And if I pull in the black level, I can just about eliminate that spot. If I then shrink the matte slightly, it looks like I have a good matte at this point. But let's go back to the composite view, and we find that we end up with an outline around the cup. Here's where you can use an additional filter that's available in Motion that isn't available in Final Cut. Final Cut does have the Luma keyer, but I'm going to go to Filters, Keying, and choose the Matte Magic filter. I'll shrink my matte in order to remove that white outline. And just like that, I've got a really nice Luma key. Now that that's done, the next step is to matte out this background here. So I'll move my playhead to the beginning of this clip, Shift-I. I'll use my Bezier mask tool and draw a quick mask. I'll click drag to make curved Bezier handles. Now, of course, that mask doesn't follow the cup. A couple of options for this. And of course, you could do this in Final Cut as well. It has a draw mask tool and you can animate these points. But before we do that, you can save some work by first match moving this mask to follow the cup. So with the mask selected, from the Behaviors pop-up menu, I'll choose Motion Tracking, Match Move. And I'll select an edge of the cup. And I just want to adjust position, and I'll click Analyze. And you can see the mask now moves with the cup. Now you'll still need to adjust it, but it gives you a good starting point. So I'll go back to the beginning, Shift-I. I'll turn on recording now, And I'll move forward in time. And when the mask gets off, I can adjust these Bezier points. And I'm using my forward arrow key to work through and adjust these as I move. And that was a lot easier than needing to adjust those points on every frame. And now we have a nice mask that follows along with the cup. Great, let's turn on our background. And we notice we've got a nice key now. You need to stop playback to see it properly. But of course the cup just ends right there. Now, you could take this video and adjust its timing. In the properties inspector at the bottom, we could time remap it. We could slow the speed down, or we have different speed options, but that will ruin our tracked mask. So instead what I'm going to do with this cup selected is I'm going to make a clone of it. Make a clone layer. I'll turn off the original one and I can close it. And then I can retime the clone, which will keep that mask intact. So what I'm going to do is just drag in the speed parameter until the length of that clone stretches out to that marker. And now that cup lasts for the entire time. Great, let's go to a position where my hand's already in the frame. And then what I'll do is turn off recording. I'll scale down the clone and position it over my hand. Now I want the cup to move with my hand. Instead of using keyframes, I'm going to start out with a match move behavior. So I move to the point where my hand's in the frame, about there, position the cup where I want it. Behaviors, motion tracking, match move. And I want to match this cup to the video, so I'll drag the video into the well, and I'll drag this little target to my thumb. Now, you could include scale and rotation and add another tracker, but I found it just doesn't work really well. But just tracking position can be very helpful here. I'm going to tap I to trim the endpoint of the match move to start right here. And I want the match move to stop right before I flip my hand, right about there. So I'll tap O, Shift I to go back to the beginning of the match move, and then I'll click Analyze. Great. And now for that part of the clip, the cup follows my hand. Now with the playhead at the start of the match move, I'll select the group containing this clone layer. I'll set a keyframe per position. Move the playhead back until my hand's down below the screen, and drag that cup down. And play that back. Now the keyframes of my group animate the cup up, then the match move takes over to keep it following the hand. I also want to adjust the scale as I move my hand forward right here towards the camera. It starts right about there. So what I'll do, with that foreground group still selected, I'll set a keyframe for position in Z space, and maybe a keyframe for each of X and Y in case I need to move as well. Move forward about there, and then I'll move this forwards in Z space. And I do need to move it over a little bit as well. Let's take a look at that. I can open the keyframe editor with Command 8. And with just this position Z keyframe selected, I can zoom a little closer and adjust the Bezier handles. This is another advantage to motion, is you can adjust the animation by adjusting these Bezier handles of these keyframes. Command 8 to close that, to get a little smoother push forward. I still think it's a little too big, and it's a little too late, so I'm going to pull this keyframe back in time. That's better. Great. Finally, to make the cup disappear, I'll use a filter. So with my clone layer selected, Filters, Stylize, Bat TV. I'll trim that to start at the playhead, and I want it to end right where that match moves ends. In the Filters Inspector, I'll set the roll down to 0 so we see the full cup. I'll crank up the waviness and play with a few of the other parameters a little bit. And then I want that to animate. So what I'm going to do is add a parameter behavior to the waviness amount. Add parameter behavior, wriggle. I'll select the apply mode to subtract since I already have a large amount on there, and maybe set that to about 100. And I want it to be pretty noisy and pretty frequent. And let's see what that looks like. Great. What I did from there, you could just export this as a completed composition right now, but in order to have more flexibility, what I did is I turned off my background and I exported just the foreground element as Apple ProRes 4x4 in order to have an alpha channel. And then I composited that back in Final Cut Pro. Since I used my reference movie, the timing matched perfectly. Okay, hey, it's Mark from Ripple Training. So today on MacBreak Studio, I'm going to show you how to levitate an object using motion. Hope you like that. Leave a comment below. We'll see you next week here on MacBreak Studio.